Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters, and we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. But today we have a great guest with us today, someone who has been shaking up the conversation online. He's primarily, you see him on Twitter holding fort down there. He's a former Marine and Navy bomb squad member, Tom Sauer. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Dave. Good. Doing really well. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Now, I want to just get your take as we see the headlines coming in. And I always, people say, Drudge went leftist, but I still enjoy his headlines. He's always got even when I don't agree with him, he has, he says this headline of Trump trials, and tribulations. And, of course, it's links to these different headlines about what's happening here with the RICO Trump case in Georgia. This is the fourth indictment now that he's had. And it's very, these guys, we have to hand it to these Democrats. They're very theatrical. They start off with the least compelling indictment, and then it gets stronger. Next one's stronger. Next one's
yeah.
And I'm like, man, you guys, you really love the theatrics. You've probably got some kind of entertainment producer behind the scenes coaching you on how to do this, like they did with the January 6th committee. They had this ABC, entertainment executive. I'm like, man, you guys are really good at this whole showcase and stuff.
They are effective at the theatrics. And thing I got to say is we mentioned this offline earlier, but I am concerned that I don't think it should be. I'm concerned that it's like all this bombardment, it just throws so much hair and makes the whole thing so messy that there's going to be some folks who say, hey, look, I might have liked Trump, but I don't know how this is going to work. This is just too much. And they're going to walk away, or at least, become apathetic. Who knows? Personally, if you ask me, the most interesting option is supporting and voting for the political prisoner. That's exciting. That's a new one. But I think most people who spend any time on this can kind of see it for what it is. You don't have to have a JD to figure this out, but I would say that your typical voter, and one thing I have to remind myself, I spend a lot of time with, as you say, normies, right? As in people who are not on Twitter, people who might be on Facebook or Instagram, who aren't following these kinds of conversations, who don't watch these sorts of things. They, even if they're notionally conservative and notionally Christian, they might watch Fox. They might see that. They might see, see something like that. And I think there might be too many people out there who just kind of throw their hands up and just, So that's where it might be effective. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. But that's what I think the play is.
Yeah. To kind of overwhelm. I was thinking about that too, that there's a lot of folks, if they're facing a general election and they basically see the entire media and entertainment complex and government bureaucracy say, we are going to pitch a 24/7 hissy fit like you can't imagine,
right?
If you put this guy on us again, that there's a lot of folks who might say, dang, it's not even Trump's fault, but I'm not voting for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I don't want that
fight. A lot of folks just, I don't want the fight. And I wish it weren't so, but that is my concern. I do try to spend a lot of time between, I think about how I wish things were and what the right things are, and then I also try to ground myself in reality as much as possible. And like, well, here's how the actual things are going to play out. Here's how the world really works, and try to be a little stoic over it sometimes when it comes to just like, hey, what are the things that I have control of my life over? Why am okay if I don't have control over these things? Why am I allowing it to upset me? And or weigh in my mind when maybe it's like, okay, I need to focus on other things that can impact myself and the people around me. If that makes any sense.
We're going to get into that a little bit later. I want to get into kind of what can people do in the midst, because a lot of folks are paralyzed by negativity from all of this, and there's a certain level of vicarious anxiety that they're thinking, wait, this was the guy who they believed was doing the right thing, and now it's just constant persecution. Meanwhile, the Epstein Island buddies are just doing just fine. Tapes were nicely secured by the raid that they did, and you just think to yourself, is there any semblance of justice? And that's a question that a lot of folks have on their minds. But like you mentioned, there's other things that we can affect. Now, is that just a copium, as they would call it? Is that cope that we're saying that, to go feed, someone at the local food line?
I mean, hey, look, maybe it is like, that's, one thing. And that's even kind of what we do with, my company line of work is just to like, we know that we're not going to be able to change the world, but if we can change the worlds, plural, the worlds for some people, for a number of people, I say their world, their lives is what I really get at. And like, that's great. And I've always found that there's a lot of folks out there who can spend a lot of time, screaming at the world or, whatever is going wrong in the world they're reading in their news, but they don't have their own lives together. So it's one of those things where I believe there is some real value on focusing your time and attention on the things that impact you and then the people around you. Right? Family, friends, community, kind of work out from there. And until you get that stuff at least somewhat dialed, then, I do feel that the real copium is like angry tweets and posts online and getting into some Facebook spat with your uncle you haven't seen in 10 years about Trump or Biden or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel that's just really a real waste of time and energy
So in some sense, the politics is the kind of distraction from reality. Yeah. And
I think so. Yeah.
And yet you're saying some people have reversed that and they make, the daily life feel like that's the distraction from the reality, which is this.
Sure. You might be stagnant in your career. Your kids hate you. You and your wife hardly talk, like you don't know your neighbors. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it doesn't have to be all those things, but it could be any number of those things.
Yeah. That raises a good point, that politics is, I say it's scapegoat ping pong, where we're always trying to blame the other team. But you're right, a lot of this is sublimated problems that people carry with them. I think that's what animates a lot of this hate Trump movement. If you're not frothing at the mouth at seeing this man suffer like they are, then you're one of him, and that means you're in league with the witch they're trying to burn. And therefore, you deserve to be burned too. That's you don't get to that place overnight. That comes from taking a lot of anger and resentments about other things in your life and pouring them into a vicarious, outlet, just dumping it all into one channel, And
if you're going to care about politics, like if you actually like decide like that's something you get into, like you should probably care a hell of a lot more about who's on your city council, if you're in a city, right? Or, county commission, depending on where you live, and who's on the school board. Right. Especially if you got kids in school, right. If they go into public schools, which, not everyone has the luxury of time or money to be able to put their kids through private schools or homeschool or anything like that. So, I think about that more often, especially, I have a small business here in California, and the local city council, like I care a lot about who's on there. And because frankly, more likely than not, your city council or your county commission or your state assembly, like they've got a whole heck of a lot more influence on your life than whatever the hell is going on in DC more often than not. I mean, not all the time, but most of the time. A lot of people don't even know who their state representative is, who's on their city council, who's the mayor, who's the county commissioner, or what have you, right? And people just get obsessed in the circus of what's going on. And, guilty as charged. I mean, I look at a lot of this stuff nationally as it's almost like professional sports in some ways, but there are, when I say professional sports, as in I like to follow it. It's interesting. It's, but I'm watching these different sides. I'm seeing Red Sox fans and Yankees fans just going at it left and right. Things are heating up and getting a little bit more different now, because I think that we're in uncharted territory with all these Trump indictments.
Yeah.
I think we really are. But I try my best to not get too spun up about it. And every once in a while, I've caught myself getting, I almost feel like a little bit of anxiety, like this is BS. This I cannot believe this. Wow, things are getting really bad. And that is sometimes I'll have to stop, take a breath, put the phone down, or whatnot, and go spend some time with my family, or focus on something work related that actually might actually move the ball forward in my life one way or another, or someone I care about.
Now, there's kind of two reactions you see from dissident anti-establishment people. One is flee the cities, go to the country, and hunker down and create like a parallel society out of the way. And then there's another side that says no, dive into the establishment institutions, the universities, the corporate world, and try to contest your worldview or your values, and make sure that they are able to land in schools and universities and business and so forth. Which of that spectrum do you tend to lean towards?
I found myself, at least for the moment, in the latter one, where I'm involved in it. I talk to folks in local government, talk to folks on Capitol Hill. I've got friends in national media and politics. I live in I guess you call it a small city. I live in Newport Beach, California, which is probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. Its major drawback, it is absurdly expensive to live here. So we're about 45 minutes south of Los Angeles. It's clean, it's safe, it's pretty. We're near the ocean. Nobody locks their doors. We don't have, we have the police department, like they pull cats out of trees, that kind of thing, where it's wonderful, but it's just absurdly expensive. And, that's the downside to it. So I am involved in that side of the world. I do love it here. I love what I'm doing. However, I own a company that we're growing quite a bit. And if and when one day we were to make an exit, and I've got, if I'm in a position where it's like, okay, well, my grandchildren will never have to work, sort of a thing, right? Then you might see me try to hey, maybe let's go buy a big property out in the middle of nowhere where it's all pretty at least. So I don't know if I want to go the full Peter Thiel route of buying a ton of property in New Zealand and spending a few $1 million and buying a Kiwi passport. I don't know, maybe he's got like a jet fueled ready to go. But, that's one thing I know that a number of the very well-off people do, is they've got land out there and they're just ready if hey, if the world goes to shit, we're going to, hop on the jet and hang out in New Zealand, which I understand. It makes sense. It's the last place in the world.
If they calculate that's the least likely area to have nuclear fallout exposure or clouds or something.
Well, I mean, hey, one way I look at it, if all of a sudden we're looking at some nuclear terrible thing, well, look, it's game over. It's game over, right? Yeah. I wouldn't even look forward to having to survive in that afterwards. So, but then out in New Zealand, the way I look at it, because I spent a summer out there when I was in the military. We did some training with the New Zealand Special Air Service, which great group of guys. And we spent a full month out there. It was gorgeous. And I kind of looked around and realized, wait, there's fewer than 5 million people on these islands. There are 30 million cattle, 50 million sheep, right? Mild summer, mild winter. Tons of fresh water. It's green. It's safe. You're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody wants to invade you. They have a hard time getting to you, even if they wanted to. So so if you're barring, anything but a, massive global nuclear winter, you're pretty safe there. It's pretty good. It's not the worst place to go. Yeah. So I've always joked about that. Maybe I even casually look at property in New Zealand, despite the fact that they've got a commie government or whatever right now. However,
what's up with that whole safety, nice area breeds horrible governance? Isn't that interesting? Right?
No idea. That was
cozy,
before, that was
really,
after.
Yeah.
after I spent time there, and I was like, oh, wait, never mind here. But who knows? But there's still a lot of like open
I remember
space
all
out
those Revolver.news headlines about horse-faced goblin in New Zealand.
Oh, yeah. Poor lady.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
they
mean,
were
yeah,
just
that was
every day
rough.
there was a new horror show out of that area for a while.
Oh yeah, but but I'll say this much: it was like the safest, nicest area. The army guys that we were the New Zealand army guys we worked with apologized because they didn't have room for us for my particular team in there on base. So we stayed at a hotel out in town. It was like, the New Zealand army is like really small, like 30,000 people total, right? And so it was right outside of their little base, which, like in a lot of army towns, it's not always the nicest, not the nicest part of town. We were staying in this motel. It was perfectly fine, but they were very nervous. They told us, we're really worried about you guys out here. I'm like, why? It's like, because 2 weeks ago, there was a murder and it was, like nearby in the city. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, it was the first one we've had all year. And I'm like, wait, you have like, they have like single digit murder rates there, and it was just, to me, it's like, and they're panicking over it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, what a safe place. So I don't know. Hopefully it stays that way. I'm not sure. I wouldn't mind. There are worse places I could end up, but I do love America. So I don't know. Maybe I can one day we'll migrate out of, off the coast because, I'm probably 400 yards off of Pacific Coast Highway. You pull the driveway here. You see the Pacific Ocean. It's gorgeous. It's nice. It's safe, but I don't know if it's going to stay like this forever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and one way that might not stay that way forever is what's going on in the Ukraine conflict. As a former Marine, what's your take on us using all of our resources to continue this proxy war with no exit game plan in sight?
I don't know what the hell they're thinking.
Yeah.
And, and I got a lot of friends who are still in the military. As a matter of fact, part of the reason why we had to, do this recording at a different time was because I was at two of my closest friends had their Navy retirements. One was a pilot. The other drove ships.
Yeah.
And so like, those are two good friends of mine. And my brother is still in. And, I'm pretty well dialed into the military. Very mixed feelings on it. Like to me, the entire thing does seem like a scam of some sorts, but a few things to think about is that, 6 months after we get out of Afghanistan, which is, the total mess, not the fact that we left, but we got out the way we did it was so bad. 6 months later, the defense industry, just opened up a new market for themselves, whether it's your Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, all those at BAE, all those guys. Oh man, we got a new market now. Just, good business development, I suppose. And then, but I see what's going on here is, I've got a lot of issues with it. I think it's just in general, it's a huge mistake. I spoke to a good military buddy of mine who currently does a lot of stuff with the intelligence community. He comes from a very well-to-do family, well-off family. I'm not going to say names, but if I did, you'd probably recognize it. And, his take on it was, yeah, all those things might be true, Tom, but consider this. And this is like, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. That for a fraction of the cost of what it would take for us to do it ourselves, we are weakening a strategic rival, right? We're dramatically weak a strategic rival for for virtually no blood and virtually no American blood and a fraction of the cost. Yeah. And if I want to be like overly pragmatic to the point of being just like ice cold blood in my veins kind of thing, like I can see that. But to me, the real problem is just the risk of there being some sort of a miscalculation. And then you're going to look at things could get really ugly really fast. And then it's game over. And to me, the idea of even flirting with us going to war with Russia over what? I don't, I see that case that, a friend of mine made, but I understand it, but like, absolutely not. It's just not worth it. I'm kind of tired of war. I've got a lot of friends who don't have all their fingers and toes or their eyeballs or are able to walk. And I've got some friends who aren't around anymore. And I would, and some of those who aren't around anymore, they died while they were here, it was addiction, suicide, and all the rest. I'm just kind of tired of it. I would
Yeah.
like there to be no war for a little while. Or if we do have to prepare to deter a war, it's not against Russia, it's against China, but
Yeah.
of deterrent. Not, I think it's pretty less I think it's somewhat unlikely we're going to get into a shooting match with China. I think it's unlikely, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a deterrence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
When you look at that, the stakes, I mean, what it seems to have done is hasten the demise of the dollar because they weaponized it and it didn't really do anything but strengthen Russia's hand in some cases, and create a more incentivized desire to move away from the dollar and create this alliance with other nations, the BRICS, the whole thing. So it makes you wonder, what like your friend, what they would say, is that worth the cost to,
Probably not. Probably not. And but I think there's this very typical attitude. I think there's still people that, even though they might not intellectually say it, I think they emotionally and intrinsically still kind of have like the Fukuyama view of the world, like the end of history. Like, hey, we won World War II, and then we beat the Soviets in the Cold War, and now we've got this, rules-based, what do they call rules-based system, rules-based order, which basically which is just a pseudonym for American liberal democratic hegemony, and to a less charitable term would be like globo homo, like that whole aspect of the world, and it's kind of gross. But I think a lot of people just kind of think I think there's a lot of hubris in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of hubris in the military, frankly. Like I remember not that long ago, I, had to, here's something weird. One of the jobs I had in the Navy after I got to do all the fun, cool guy stuff, jumping out of planes, blowing shit up with my friends and all that. I had a staff job where I was working for an admiral's staff or a commodore, where my job was called plans officer. Now, in military jargon, when they say plans officers, that means operation plans, means war plans. You're like the guy who helps like coordinate and write and represent the commander when you do war planning meetings, right? And all these big exercises that we always have in Korea or elsewhere, all what those exercises really are us like exercising the war plan, planning to see, can we do, and when we say O plans, operation plans, that means just a war plan. So I did the ones for at least our tiny little slice for expeditionary forces and explosive ordnance disposal, yada, yada, for the Navy out there. And so I was really familiar with all these plans. And everyone always would think that if we had to go to war with North Korea, like it would be like some sort of like a walk in the park. And it's like, well, and it's like, guys, we had a hard time. We struggled against against the Taliban. And I mean, well, we won all the battles, but we lost the war, right? We struggled in all these other places. And there's a lot of hubris who just thinks like, we're just going to go kick ass wherever we are in some conventional conflict. And if you look at what's going on in Ukraine right now, it's really ugly. And I don't think anybody's winning. Nothing's decisive. And people can make the case saying, well, Russia is, the Russians are being a little reserved. They're pulling some punches right now because they don't want to commit everything they have. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't really care. But it's just like, it's such an ugly, like a modern war, even just a conventional modern war, right, is really scary. But I guess that is one of the advantages of what we're seeing in Ukraine, is we are able to view and watch, again, like we said earlier, for fraction of the cost in terms of blood and treasure, is we're learning about how a 21st century modern warfare will go. Like, it's going to look like this. Yeah. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but I mean, it's like, well, at least we're learning.
Imagine telling that to the Ukrainian soldiers out there being pushed to the lines by their government.
Oh no, it's awful.
Oh, you're here to be
absolutely awful.
You're here to be a guinea pig for us to observe. What the? I mean, good.
And I know that there probably are or were many Ukrainians out there who like, hey, we need your help. We're defending our country. We're being invaded. And whether anyone agrees with that or not, like, hey, that's fine. But I don't know if there are as many Ukrainians out there today who are as enthusiastic about fighting. I don't know. I could be wrong. I've never been to Ukraine. I don't know if you have. Probably not. I don't know what's going on other than what we see out there and we talk to folks. But yeah, it is pretty awful if you think about that. Like, yeah, you're kind of being our guinea pigs. But I think that's just what's happening.
Yeah, it's
Messed up.
yeah, it's not what they advertised it to, like you said, the normies and everything. But unfortunately, they don't need to do much to get the normies on board with whatever their newest thing is, as people
Mhm.
have commented online. You know, one of the newest things they've talked about, and I've got to ask you, since you're talking about your background in the Navy, is all of this new, news about UFOs and disclosure. I got to get your take on that. So that you knew
Yeah,
that was coming.
yeah, probably is. Well, I'll say this much: like, I was really, really fortunate that like I got to do in like some different parts of my career. I got to do all these really like very unique, different things. I didn't have a very. I had a very like atypical career in the military. It was in different area. I did everything from special operations, some intelligence work, to all this other
So
stuff.
what was it like to
Big
fly in those
picture.
Tic Tacs? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, is but I got to see some really, really interesting like classified stuff, like really interesting. I'm like, whoa, we do this? That's awesome. But I'm happy to report that, well, or maybe I hate to disappoint you, nothing in that realm I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
I do suspect that whether or not all those things are true or not, I don't know. But one of the things that drives me crazy about all this UFO talk is that there's so little primary evidence, as in we have these whistleblowers come out
Yeah.
and like, oh, this happened, I was read to this program, but nobody's like showing a picture or showing exactly where this is, or showing, and it's always like, well, I didn't see it, but I talked to people who saw it. Right. Or where it's like, in this world, this day and age where there's cameras everywhere and there's some pretty high tech stuff out there, if we did have possession of a former, alien spaceship or something like that, I don't know how long that would have stuck around. So I don't know. I do believe that we're not getting the full story, but us not getting the full story doesn't necessarily mean that we've been visited by aliens, at Roswell, New Mexico in the 40s, and that we've captured them doing stuff. Like, I doesn't necessarily think that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I had Sean Cahill on, who's a former Navy captain. Master at arms,
Okay.
and he said that he was on that USS. I don't know, was it Roosevelt? I think that when they saw he was there seeing those things spinning around and jumping in the water and flying up in the really, really high instantly. I don't know. I don't know
A
what.
lot of ships record that. It's interesting is like a lot of like having spent time on big ships, a lot of that data is recorded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it may be, it might be existing somewhere,
Yeah.
but I don't know. And I'm not going to say, I think it's okay to say I have no clue.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And
What's your gut? Do you think it's just why is this now becoming mainstream? Is it just a
I think that
distraction, as everybody says?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's meant to be a little bit of a distraction by some folks. Yeah. From other things going on. I mean, same reason that there's a new Trump indictment that comes out right as something crazy about Biden shows up, and then 48 hours later, new indictment dropped, and it's all these things. I wouldn't be surprised if there is something like that. What really, I'll say that what does really like concern me, where here's something that's real and scary and bad, is what's going on in Maui right now.
Yeah.
Right? Where it seems like there was massive government incompetence somewhere, neglect. I don't think it was anything deliberate or malicious, and it seems like a lot more people died there from what little we're getting, kind of whispers of this. And a lot more people died there than we think. And a large number of them might have been children, and that were sent home, who were home alone while their parents were at work. And there were no alarms, no nothing. And the kids stayed in their home. The fire rolled through and destroyed entire neighborhoods. And and I think that, this is not me trying to put a tinfoil hat on, but there's a lot of folks at the local, maybe at state level, who are trying to lock down everything, get control of the situation, because there are probably, sadly, a number of people who are going to discover that I'm scared. Hundreds of children might be dead now, burned alive, because of incompetence, and they're scared to like release all that and make it clear, because there could be actual rioting and violence against the local government there. And I can't blame them if there were.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine those are your kids and you found out all this, and they were lying about things, or they're trying to cover it up, and they're grossly incompetent and negligent in their job. I can understand. I can understand why there might be people out for blood. So but that one, like the fact that Maui isn't the biggest story right now, just I don't know. It's crazy. I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's symptomatic of what I call lunchroom drama taking over for meritocracy and competence. You know, we're in lunchroom drama politics, fighting
like
over identity, fighting over who's sitting at the cool table, who's getting this or that accolade, instead of actually thinking about what does it mean to have competence, what does it mean to have merit, what does it mean to have, like you said, you know, systems that work, that are safe, that are people focused, rather than these grand, as a friend of mine always says, abstractions. You know, when you have saved the planet, that's an abstraction, because that can mean anything. And then that justifies doing a lot of ridiculous stuff that really costs people lives and stuff. So, you know, it's a horrible story, and it's
I'm afraid it's going to I'm afraid it's going to turn out to be a lot worse in the days ahead, in the days and weeks ahead. I'm afraid like things are going to start showing up there that it's a lot worse than we thought.
Yeah, kind of like with that Katrina story where it just got worse and worse, you know, the death toll and everything. I hope it's not to that scale of loss of life. But, you know, Tom, it's been great having you on. I wanted to ask you just a little bit about, you know, folks who are interested in helping veterans. Can you give us a little bit of your take on it as a veteran? I know you're involved with things in this field, but a lot of folks want to do stuff to help folks who come home and have a lot of different challenges in front of them.
Yeah, sure. So I guess a little bit of backstory, I don't mind telling about it, is that I joined the military right out of high school, but right before I left for the military, my dad died of a drug overdose. This is 24 years ago. A long time, 1999, summer of 99. And so, but he had struggled with alcoholism, depression, addiction his entire life. And it's something that always stuck with me. So when I got out, I was, when I decided to get out, because I got out of the military because I wasn't having fun anymore. And it felt kind of boring. So I wanted to do something different. I was working for a defense contractor, selling combat diver equipment to my friends, to special operations guys, for a while, and it wasn't very fulfilling. And so I wanted to start something different, but it was that mental health world and addiction recovery where, obviously that's a huge issue nationwide, worldwide, but also especially for veterans. Started the company. We were fortunate enough to get a VA contract. So we worked directly with the Department of Veterans Affairs. We're really fortunate in that. So we treat guys for very intensive mental health and addiction treatment. It's not like, we have like a telehealth session where you talk about your feelings. It's like, these are guys who are on the brink of death or incarceration. Many of them have been incarcerated before. And so what we do is we fill gaps where the VA has. So for example, like capacity gap or, something with the VA treatment. And so we take care of all those guys. And so we've treated more than 300 veterans, and these are for long-term stays. It's not like, hey, they're popping in once. It's like 30, 60, 90-day stays with us in a very intensive environment. So we've treated about 300 of those guys so far. It's something I'm actually really proud of. I feel like I'm making more of a difference in the world today than I ever was in the military. So, that saving lives, repairing some marriages, reuniting families. I think it's really good. So we're expanding to Florida, your neck of the woods, soon, out in Central Florida. So we're in the middle of that right now. But my partner out there runs most of that operation, several partners actually. And I'm out here in California with the locations here. But
what is the common root of what did you see a lot?
Oh, I mean, I can tell you right now. I mean, if I were to pull up our electronic medical record, right, which has profiles of all of the patients we've had and everything like that. The vast majority of them, there are, more often than not, your typical profile is a white or Hispanic male who is in their mid to late 40s or early 50s. They have depression, they have alcoholism, and they have PTSD. And that's a common thread. Almost every single one of them fall into alcohol, depression, in terms of age, but majority of our folks are white, Hispanic, white or Hispanic. But it's just, you always have alcoholism, depression, PTSD, and they're usually middle-aged. That, and there are exceptions, but that's most of them. And then you might throw in on top of that, we have those with opioid use disorder, fentanyl, meth, all that stuff. So, but like, that's kind of the baseline.
What's driving it? Is it coming back from the high energy intensity of the mission and then everything slowed down here? Is it the things they see, the things they regret, the things they miss? What?
Some of, there are some cases of that, but this is one thing that's really crazy is a ton of the trauma that our folks are dealing with. It's childhood trauma. You'd be amazed, right? Because, everyone looks at, there are a lot of folks who look at the VA, and if you're, former military guy, some people, when they look at someone like this, and they always assume, oh, well, like, did you kill anybody, or did you see people get killed? You must have been in really serious combat. And you probably have PTSD, and it's probably the bad kind, right? They always kind of assume that, but the vast majority of the folks that we take, many of them were, not involved in any of that. And a lot of them, just their biggest issues are childhood trauma. Now, we also have folks who had to deal with stuff overseas or just during their time in the military as well. But, veterans are people like anyone else, and they've got all their problems and issues that are, either related to the military or sometimes they're not related to the military. They're just, getting through life. Especially if, I'd say for me, I can say this, is that when my dad died of a drug overdose, right before, like just a couple weeks before I left, I didn't have time to process it. Like I would jokingly say my ass got kicked into adulthood, and graduate high school, dad passed away, boot camp. I didn't have time. I really didn't have any time to grieve. And so I didn't really deal with it till later.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that's a heck of a transition in your life, to go through that. All of those things at the same time. And then you were shipped off to where?
Marine Recruit Depot, San Diego, California. I was down there. So I joined the Marines first, and I managed to, from there, about a couple years later, I found my way into the Naval Academy. I don't know how they let me do it. So, and I had a very hard time at Naval Academy. I wasn't the best student. Right. I just, I really struggled. So I had to go to, they sent myself and a number of other folks, they sent you to a year-long prep school in Rhode Island called Naval Academy Prep School, where it's just a crash course in calculus, English, physics, chemistry, and just to prepare you for it. And I needed that because if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have made it through the first semester because I wasn't the best student. I didn't have a very good academic foundation. Better now.
Yeah.
But and also the fact that I treated the Naval Academy like it was a civilian college. I was having a little too much fun, a little too much freedom. And so, I spent a lot of time on restriction. I spent a lot of time having to stand at attention in front of much senior officers where, I'm standing, they're sitting, they have a cup of coffee. I don't have a cup of coffee. They're asking questions. I'm not asking questions. They get to speak whenever they want. I don't get to speak, one of those kinds of situations, where, and then immediately followed by some pretty strict punishment. So, I did a little bit of that. And, but then I found my way into the Navy, drove ships for a while. And then for about 3 years, loved it, including one of the ones behind me in the picture. And then I found my way into explosive ordnance disposal, which is the coolest job in the world. I loved it. So we got to do all sorts of fun stuff. I got to be on a special operations task force where our main job was to locate a terrorist nuclear weapon and then have to deal with it. It was pretty cool. I mean, I spent a ton of time. That's why I was kind of interested in seeing that Oppenheimer movie because I spent a lot of time at Los Alamos and at Sandia. And I had no idea. It's kind of the origin story of that place and all that. There's some amazing stuff that we do that is pretty cool. I'm like, oh, we do this.
What's the story behind those? They kept talking about suitcase nukes back when they were trying to do that thing with Iran back in the,
that was a real thing. That was sort of the thing that we trained for. I mean, and for example, we've got some pretty impressive counterterrorism, believe it or not. I mean, say what you want about the Patriot Act and all the nasty things out there about the CIA and the FBI, credit where it's due. We haven't had anything like that really happen, like a very real fear, like another 9/11 type thing, or God forbid, what we called an IND, an improvised nuclear device, right? Or a weapon mass destruction being snuck into a major population center. Because that was what the job, like the units I was a part of, that was our job. And it was, you know, if you think about like the very impressive counterterrorism units, you know, your SEAL Team 6, your Delta Force, you know, and other units you might not have heard of, right, that are out there, is, you know, they're the premier counterterrorism units in the world. Well, what is the greatest terrorism threat? Which would be a weapon of mass destruction, you know, snuck into Manhattan or you know, or DC or Los Angeles, something like that. And I did not know, it wasn't until I got involved in all that, I really learned that there is a very large infrastructure of a lot of people that is very well funded to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen. And there was like this entire thing where just like, you know, it's kind of,
how does that compute with their gaping open border with tons of people coming in from every country in the world?
That is something I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, really.
That's kind of a massive. That's kind of a massive chink in the armor. If I was looking from the outside,
I absolutely agree. One thing I learned is we do have ways of detecting and tracking where all those materials are, but the only problem is you know, we have to be right every single time. We have to bat 1,000, right? Bad guys only have to be right once, and you know, I mean, which is true. You know, just a reality. But yeah, there's and also we also kind of learned, this is one thing that's kind of taught to me, was that when it comes to defeating a terrorist, you know, nuclear device or any sort of WMD, is that playing defense in the sense of like hoping to detect something that comes into a port or comes in somewhere right through the border, like that's not the way to stop it, because by the time it gets that close, you're already in deep shit. It's too late, right? It's practically too late. So the emphasis is really on what we call upstream defeat, which is like, hey, we're going overseas. We're offensive in nature to stop it, so it doesn't even get onto a ship or get on an aircraft. It doesn't even get near us. And I think that makes sense. You know, I mean, that does make the most sense. One thing that's kind of interesting though is I learned, you know, and this is like a little nugget that blew me away, was we do have radiation monitors that are seen and unseen all over the country at ports of entry, tons of them. Have you ever? Okay, so I know that you're in the South. You know, you're in Florida. You've probably driven up and down 95, right?
Yeah.
You know, from Florida all the way up. Do you ever notice how like there's certain parts in like North Florida and Southern Georgia that have like for no reason out of nowhere, like especially at night at certain times, the traffic lane would like narrow from like 4 lanes to 1 lane.
Yeah.
You know, and they have the big orange barrels lining up. And it's like, there's times where I've driven through there. I'm like, where's the construction? What are we doing? It's just creating a massive bottleneck, you know? So I always thought that was weird. And had somebody explain that to me. He's like, yeah, that is kind of weird. Did you know you can fit radiation monitors into one of those giant orange barrels? Yeah. So that if a truck drives past you, or drives past it, it'll ring it off. Wow. He's like, that's crazy, isn't it? I'm like, oh, didn't know that. You know, like now he didn't come out, hey, the reason why we're doing that is to check for people bringing in radiological devices or nukes or whatever. But that was the implication. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, okay, so maybe we're doing something right. But if it's on a truck on I-95, you're in deep trouble already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're in deep trouble already. So yeah.
Well, Tom, it's great having you on. Where can people follow you and keep up with what you've got going on?
Oh, hey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. So I'm my drug of choice is Twitter as well, like many of us. So I'm on Twitter at Thomas B. Sauer. And then also additionally, if somebody wants to take a look at our company, we're at miramarhealth.com. That's there's even a little video about us on there. And we're currently expanding, and late this year we'll be opening Valor Lakes in Central Florida, in Claremont, Florida. So,
that's a beautiful area.
Absolute pleasure being here, man.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area, so that'll be a great place. Yeah,
57-acre horse farm out there for equine therapy for veterans, working with a nonprofit. It's amazing work that the guys are doing out there. I couldn't be prouder of them.
Well, very good. Thanks again, Tom, for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much.
Well,